Hello, and welcome to another episode of Out of the Fire podcast, where we talk about fire and all kinds of other developments in health tech ecosystem. And today I have Eval and the word of Firely, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things, but mostly Dev Days is coming up, and this year it's in Minneapolis. Why don't we start with just you folks introducing yourselves, and we can maybe get into the origins of Dev Days and things like that.
Thank you for having us. Ewout, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi all, my name is Ewout, as Gene just said. I am the head nerd at Firely, mostly responsible for the technology, also founder of the company. He's been there over 10 years, I think now. And it all started out like even before, like 15 years ago, when we were involved in writing the FHIR standard. And at some point we thought that, we might actually turn this into software. So at Firely we wrote, we created a FHIR server. And of course, as you just said, one of the things we also did was start Dev Days. But I guess, Ward, I'll let you do the introductions before we dive deep into the origins of Dev Days.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm not sure if people can hear this, but Ewout is currently at the Vitalis conference, I think, in Sweden.
That's right. Yeah.
Good. So straight from the action.
Yeah, straight from the action here in the Nordics. Yeah, it's been going on for a while here. Years ago, I did a FHIR talk here when this was still rather small, and now there's like, I don't know, hundreds of talks. So it's pretty exciting to be here in the Nordics and see what's going on.
Awesome. So I'll take it over from there. So my name is Ward Wijstra. I haven't been around at Firely as long as Ewout, but I joined the company about 7 years ago, and my main role here is I'm responsible for the data modeling tools. So that's Simplifier.net, Forge, Hardy Terminal. And at some point also, actually my first week at Firely was a Dev Days in Seattle, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But then later on, I was made responsible for the content of Dev Days. So making sure that we have great keynote speakers and all our hundreds of talks at the conference are of good quality. So that's my side hustle now. But yeah, that's I guess a recurring story for Firely and Dev Days. But yeah, that's my introduction.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, so Firely is like you guys are like the Coca-Cola of fire, or like the Ford Motor Company of like, if you would put an analogy. I think why don't you tell us like about maybe the origins of Dev Days, but also maybe a little bit about how Firely got started.
Yeah, well, it basically got started because I was personally dissatisfied with the state of like health IT, HL7 V3 decades ago, V2. And I'm a 100% software developer. And I thought all these standards were actually pretty crap if you were a software developer. They were nice if you were a data modeler, but not if you were a software developer. So I started complaining loudly at these HL7 meetings until that moment came where they asked, like, why don't you, you big mouth, show us how to do it. And I met some like-minded folks like Graham Grieve and Lloyd McKenzie. And so back then we all worked for a company called FHIR, which, the oldies who joined FHIR very early might have heard of. And then back then my manager said, you know what, why don't you take a year and start writing the FHIR specification, which is called the golden chance. I'm still very grateful about that. And that's how things got started. And, years later, we actually isolated the whole FHIR business into Firely and produced, our two main products, Firely server, full-blown FHIR server, and Simplifier, the platform for sharing FHIR stuff. But I think also very early on, if you bind your company to the success of a standard, it was pretty clear that we needed a community. Also, Graham has always made this perfectly clear. Without a community, a standard's just paper. So very early on, we decided to organize a conference, and that was definitely just in the kitchen of our company, basically, to get everyone who did something with FHIR together and to discuss. And that first edition in our lunchroom at the offices, at FHIR offices, was actually a big success. We learned so much also ourselves by inviting everyone, so much new insights. It's just proved already that like getting a community over is such a big part of making this standard work. So that's how that started. It must have been like 15 years ago. And from there it got serious, right? At some point we were like, are we a company organizing conferences. All right, we're still making software. For those who were there in the beginning, we did this twice a year, once in Europe, once in the US, and that was a bit too much. So that's how
Basically, the whole company would shut down for a few weeks, just preparing the tools,
yeah.
organizing
Just make
which is
this
not a
work.
great idea if you're a product company.
No,
But
no,
yeah,
no.
Amsterdam, right?
Yeah. So we have one edition in Amsterdam, and that was last year, and then one edition in the US, and it could be anywhere, but we go for the repeat visit to Minneapolis this year. I think it's also important to mention that because this was a community event, this has never been a company event. So we invited over everyone who wanted to say something about FHIR, also our competitors, anyone who had something interesting to talk about was invited to come. And I think that's the spirit today.
that's still the case. Yeah, I know some competitors that have more talks at Dev Days than we do. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
true. Yeah. Crap, these guys have a lot of interesting things to say. Oh, whatever, if you got something interesting to say, come over.
Yeah, it's pretty unique also that we're indeed back in Minneapolis. That's our first time that we do a repeat visit in the US. Normally we rotate over there. But since 2018, we've been coming to the US. That was the first time. And now, second time in the US. Next year, back in Amsterdam.
Yeah. This is a location also that I think also atmosphere and location wise it has some overlap with our Amsterdam event, which is like our mother event. But we really like that location in Minneapolis. So we are always looking for this kind of informality. And we want a kind of conference where after a week of joining in, people by their first name, and there's always something going on that's just giving you a new perspective, something weird. Let's make sure that there's something surprising there, and that works in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I get, and the FHIR community is one of the things that indeed sets the standard apart, and also why it works so well. Because I think everyone who comes for the first time to Dev Days feels that this is just a really helpful community, like across company and country borders. Just everyone wants other people to succeed, make healthcare more interoperable, make it affordable, give patients better access to their own data, improve healthcare quality. So it's a really, like, you can just walk up to Graham and ask him whatever you want to ask, and or to your competitors. People just want to work together. And maybe to give it an idea, just to make sure, it's the Dev Days this year is from June 15 to 18. And so generally we have around like 400 people. 3-day event this year. We have one pre-conference day and then 3 real days for the conference itself. And we have generally like 100 plus sessions, 100 plus presenters. There will be, for these 3 days, there will be 5 parallel tracks. Like there's more you can not see than you can see, but everything is also being recorded, so you have access to those recordings after the conference. Yeah, and we will keep them access for the people who have actually signed up for the conference for half a year exclusively, but then we also release them publicly to the YouTube, again as a way of building community. There's already so much content out there that people can use and learn from.
Eugene's very familiar with that because I saw your post. I did see a post. Maybe it was not Eugene, but someone analyzed all that stuff with an AI and made a nice listing out of it. I saw that last week because there's a lot on YouTube of these tutorials, and maybe it's a gold mine by now, years and years of stuff. Also, of course, some of this is obsolete by now. It's nice for historians to write books about.
We need an anthology.
Exactly. Yeah, but we made a point of I think we also make sure that the core at the core of Dev Days there is still these tutorials. In the beginning, we started with just teaching about the FHIR specification, because honestly, that was all there was, right? There was no experience implementing this stuff yet. But as it grew, and I could see that happening, more and more people brought in experience about actually implementing it. But we still also nowadays make sure that there's still this tutorial core with the newest and the latest of what's going in the FHIR standard, but also still all the basics, like how does terminology work, how does communicating in FHIR work, the HTTP stuff, all that core is still there.
Yeah, maybe also good to specify that FHIR Dev Days really focuses on people who need to implement FHIR. So this is really the Dev Days. It's focusing on those developers. You will maybe, if you're familiar with FHIR and HL7, you will know that that there's also these working group meetings, and they're really about changing and iterating and improving the FHIR standard itself over time, which is super important. but there will be, of course, a way wider group of people who are confronted with FHIR, who need to implement this, who want to take advantage of it to build apps, etc. And that's really what Dev Days focuses on. So indeed, we have that core of FHIR tutorials to get you up to speed with what you need to know from all the different parts of it. But there's also a lot of sessions of people just sharing learnings. That's our bread and butter. There will be a lot of people who will tell you, like, I've tried to implement this CQL, or I tried to implement the clinical decision support, and this is what we learned. This is what didn't work. This is what worked. This is and this is the open source software that you can use that we made available, etc. So yeah, that's really how they're set apart. So HL7 International organizes the working group meetings, and then FHIR Dev Days is co-organized by HL7 International and FHIR every time.
So obviously, huge props to FHIR for setting these up every year and continuously kind of driving the adoption of FHIR. And I feel like specifically in the last several years, we've seen a big change, right? And I think where FHIR has really came out of the shadows, or kind of from just being very kind of like a specific thing to more like front and center. So we've seen now the adoption of FHIR standards pretty much across the world.
Mm-hmm.
We see in the US specifically, it's tied to all of the, you know, government regulations. We have all the Cures Act, we have the HTI, we're now 5, and we have all of the regulations around patient access and now CMS aligned networks and all of the other things that are happening. And essentially, FHIR is how you get anything done in healthcare now, right? Like, I don't think anybody is working on anything other than advancing FHIR. So I think this event is really critical, which I'm actually very excited about going this year because this is going to be my first in-person event. So I have attended before virtually, and I've obviously watched the videos that are posted, I think 6 months after the fact, right? And serve as this kind of like canonical, knowledge base for FHIR, which is incredible. And, it's just so much there. And I feel like you can't watch all of them, but like even if you're attending, you probably can't attend all the sessions. So you end up going back and watching some of them anyway. But it's really representing like the whole spectrum. Like it's not just developers, although that's a big focus on it, of like how do you implement FHIR. It's also people who are building products, people that are building solutions end to end, policy experts. We have like industry personalities, right? We have just interoperability in general. Now it's really kind of this coming out event for interoperability that's now with our superpowers with AI is just blowing up. And I feel like it's going to grow more and more now every year. So I'm obviously very excited to present and talk about my OpenClaw project.
Yeah.
And how that's using FHIR, and then also how am I able to run all my data through it and have agents that are using all of that.
Yeah, AI is obviously a huge theme this year, and really cool to see your work. I recently saw a little bit of it on the agent of FHIR presentations, but yeah, that's a huge theme that we've seen this year, and really happy to have you present on that too. Yeah. And maybe
absolutely.
To join in on what you just said, the US has of course been leading in FHIR adoption with these big regulations, but the same thing is true indeed on the other side of the pond. So FHIR, originally a Dutch company, our Dutch Ministry of Health has decided that every new standard needs to be done on FHIR. The same is true for the EU in a broader scale. Also the EHDS, the big upcoming healthcare regulation that will go into effect, they've decided separately that all their new standards will be on FHIR. EHDS will probably be on FHIR, most likely. So that's completely true. We have this actually together with Dev Days. We also organized this State of FHIR survey where we interview countries from around the world. We try to get like ministries of health and people who are very familiar with this, and we're seeing the same adoption everywhere. There's a lot of excitement. We have like this year, we just closed our survey. We have more than 100 results from like 65 different countries this year, more than ever, and there's just a lot of excitement. We have a lot of African countries this year also coming online, giving insights into where they're going. So yeah, there's a lot of really nice insights also from like their perspective on FHIR and AI, how that combines together, which I think is a really interesting topic we should probably dive into more.
Yeah, I think there's I don't see an end in sight in terms of the growth of fire because if you think about you go country by country, every country in the world has humans that have healthcare that they need to take care of their needs, and somehow you need to reliably manage that information.
Mm.
And it has to be more than just, it has to be structured in some way. So as we talked about this concept of language first interoperability, or using
Right.
Yeah.
basically just like,
Yeah.
can we just talk and then AI just understands? Well, I don't think you can do that effectively without having some sort of structure. So
Yeah, right.
otherwise,
We could we could we could spend a whole talk on that topic alone, right?
yeah,
But for now, of course, we know that all of our machinery is also way more efficient and way more performant on structured data, right? Even we humans, although we now speak human language with each other, as soon as I need to make a list of addresses for my wedding, I get out my Excel sheet and I make structured data, right? There's just a very basic reason
yeah.
why your data keeps on working. So I think we'll see how, the interesting stuff is how these combine. And I must say that I am most excited about those talks. We have quite a few talks at this Dev Days that are actually obviously about, AI and fire. That's been going on for the last think 3 years or so that we saw these stocks start to appear. And also there, of course, you can see the enormous increase in depth of the talks. One of the things I'm looking forward to this year is someone created a benchmark to be able to test how well a human language query can be translated into
Mm.
querying fire data. That whole notion of, how do you vectorize your data? How do you process a human-based query, plot that into your database and get data reliable? That's the kind of stuff that excites me, and that's of course like standardizing data is so much just step zero. When you are writing a fire specification, certainly when we started this 10 years ago, everyone said when we standardize data, we're there. Now we've standardized the data, and you realize just so much, just the basics, like going from okay, but how does this work on a national workflow, right? How do I how do I control data from a patient that travels around, like even within the country, within institutions? How do you make that scale? There's so many things we still have to answer. Now we've got, the basic questions answered. Yeah, so exciting times. FHIR will be part of all these discussions, but yeah, we're only starting.
Yeah, indeed. And you also see that now that we indeed, and maybe it's too far to say actually now that we have that layer of interoperability, because of course there's a lot of silos out there still, and a lot of countries and a lot of places in healthcare that are not standardized and not available.
Right.
But now that slowly we get the first parts of that set up, we see that like also some secondary ecosystems are evolving on top of that, like the whole quality space that you're
Yep.
of course very familiar with, of being able to do your measures in a structured and open format, and being able to do your clinical decision support and your care guidelines in structured ways with CQL and the whole quality space. That's another thing that I think that we've seen a lot of submissions on, and that we'll also have a really nice panel with the accelerator from HL7 and with the people from DQuick, the people who are standardizing the quality measures frameworks in there. So there's a whole new ecosystem now emerging, both on the AI side using FHIR, now that we have FHIR APIs, but also on the more structured quality and clinical logic side. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's the biggest question I think going forward is Fire going to enable like greater standardization, or are we just going to be standardizing a lot of the same problems that we have at I guess the contrarian take is like the systems that are built around healthcare like Epic and all the other kind of EMRs and all the different workflows and configurations. You see this in the US specifically, and
Mhm.
how hard is it to really get your mapping data right? I think you guys had at Firely a couple of webinars where you talk about mapping data to Fire and how to do that correctly and make sure that you're doing it in a manner that's consistent and you're not just like shoving and pushing problems from one side to the next and then having to fix why is your Fire data garbage, right? So
Yeah, right.
it's really about like understanding what happens and trying to solve the problem at the source, not just shoving things into Fire. So I think we've had a lot of just growth in that area as a industry where we probably started out in just thinking we can just plop everything into FHIR and everything will be fine, right? What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
well, that it's, if there's one thing you learn there is that in the end, and that's of course right. I was saying like, okay, we have the technology, and I really meant to say that we have the technology, but if you take the technology problem out, then you see the rest of the problems, which is of course the mapping of the data you're just talking about, right? All these like decades of data that's there, sometimes encoded in databases where the people who originally developed the database are no longer there. No one knows exactly, how this field is used in which hospital, because, I don't know, we've installed this in like 100 plus hospitals. We don't know how people are using it. Well, try mapping that to FHIR, right? That's the real business problem. And any installation of our FHIR product start with how are we gonna integrate the existing data, how are we gonna map that. So yeah, there's that's something that's technology can't solve that, and most of the time this turns out to be an interhuman problem. You have to talk to your neighbors to talk about like procedures and how this data was gathered and all that stuff, and back to communication. But we do see, if you look at the talks for this year, that people, the most popular stuff this year is still, okay, given that we have, and you can't deny people like immediately looking forward, but given that we have data structured and standard, now how do we extract meaning from it? Or how do we query it? Because FHIR data is inherently still quite complex, structured, deeply nested, and so on and so on. And people want, like, I know that researchers, for example, they just want flat, comma separated files. So how do you do that? Or how do you these quality measures? There's a lot of stuff about quality measures, and we can go into the technology because there's a lot of very exciting things like CQL, and I think you yourself are also involved in things like
SQL
SQL.
on FHIR. Yeah.
Right, SQL on FHIR, all these things.
Yeah.
They're all talking about the same thing. Well, we have this data
Yeah.
now. Can we standardize getting stuff out of there? And how do we describe actually what quality is, what a quality measure is? How do we calculate it? And stuff like CQL tries to standardize that. Well, and I know there's a lot of things to say about that, and it will be done during dev days, but you can clearly see that people are like looking ahead, like, okay, once we've got standardized data, the next level already is, okay, now how do we improve the process? How do we measure quality? How do we measure the process with this data, with CQL and all other kinds of technologies, which is truly exciting.
And the other side of the question is, of course, there's a good argument to be made. Like, given that AI is now so good at making sense of these unstructured data, do we still need to invest all that hard manual work of trying to set up a standard together and agree on a nice implementation guide and go through the hassle, or should we just throw all the data in the context window and hope that it makes good sense of this? There's a good argument to be made that we should be focusing a lot on just guaranteeing that everyone has at least access to their data in some form, prioritizing that over like having access to a little bit of stuff, but then very nicely structured. But I think the consensus is generally that AI is super useful at helping you make those mappings and helping you make those clinical logic measures and guidelines rather than just throwing it in there and hoping that it will make sense of it. Actually, one of the questions that we had in the State of FHIR was asking these people at the ministerial level and people who are really knowledgeable in their country, to what extent, given the advance in AI, is it less important now to invest heavily in FHIR or structured data because AI can interpret structured data directly, unstructured data? So that was the predicate that we gave them, and you'll see that people strongly disagree with this. So people are definitely seeing more need for structured data now that we have AI, because that's something it can reason over, and that we know that it actually will not hallucinate or go out of bounds. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think that's a great point. Having talked to some of the folks on the AI Scribe side as well about this, and they're actually using FHIR because there's really nothing better for extracting the logic from just the conversation between a provider and the patient in the room, and really you can't really understand. A lot of times there's just lack of specifics and details enough to be able to gather meaning from that data. So for example, even in a scenario where you have an AI scribe in the room and they're having a conversation that's transcribing what the problem is, you can't just take that note, feed it into an LLM, and have it perfectly complete everything that needs to happen after that encounter, right? So you have the billing, then you have the patient follow-up, then you have the next steps on the treatment, the medications. I don't have to tell you myself, right? Like try to infer a medication from just like, oh yeah, I'm taking this medication. Like there's a million different, types of that medication, right? There's different conditions, there's different lab values. So clinical data is defined in using these standard terminology. So we have things like SNOMED that were created to, combine all of these different ways of looking at data. So I think that FHIR is not just the structure of the, people say, oh, it's just the schemas, it's just the schemas. It's actually a language, right? It's just like
Yeah.
the semantic terminology, how you translate what a condition is, how you translate what a lab value is, what a medication is. And that's the value add that I think it brings. And it makes LLMs much more powerful because they don't have to infer that. You don't have to waste time scanning 10,000 notes trying to figure out what is this condition actually supposed to be, right? And then like taking a guess, basically, right? Like it's an educated guess, but you're guessing. So just go to the condition FHIR resource and you have the answer. And then you can work on what's really important, which is what is the next action that the patient's supposed to take based on that, right? What are you supposed to know? That's what we want to focus on. And I think for many years in healthcare, we were focused on just like gathering all this data, not doing anything with it. And, as long as everybody's getting paid, we're all good. Right now, we're seeing the change of now patients at the forefront of ownership of their data. We're seeing this now with this Kill the Clipboard initiative in the US, where, you have a QR code that you can go in and you can scan, and your health data is going to flow back to the provider if you have never seen them before, or a pharmacy that you've never been at, or a lab testing facility or something, right? So, and that's
We're
FHIR,
actually
right?
working on still getting a session on Kill the Clipboard at Dev Days
Yeah,
with our long-term
yeah,
friend Dave de Bronkart, e-patient Dave.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think there's probably a lot of people that will be there at Dev Days that can talk about it. They're working on it. I know there's Josh Kelly and Jason, from Fasten, and all the other
yeah,
folks we know, right? So
yeah.
like,
Of course, George Mandel, who's a long-term
yeah,
core part of the FHIR Dev Days program, will also be part of that. He's also giving some other
yeah,
presentations on getting access to your own data with AI and Smart on FHIR and all the other core
yeah.
curriculum. Yeah.
So, you have any fun stories out from like the history of Dev Days of like what is the craziest thing that's ever happened that you can remember? Is there any fun takes
That you can
that
also
people
share. Yeah.
that you can share?
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I still remember is that in for example, in one of the Amsterdam editions, we had a comedian on stage that wanted to involve the public. And so, he was looking for a innocent bystander from the public to just, fill out the dump roll and stand next to him on the podium and do whatever he asked from that person. So he asked someone at the podium, and for some reason, and we really didn't plan this ahead, he picked Diego Kaminker. He didn't know, but who is a stand-up comedian himself. So you can imagine what happened over there with this innocent bystander getting up the podium, actually just stealing the show, starting to sing songs. And this guy was like, oh, man, what's going on? I think that was one of those moments where we were all like, oh, this community, man, it's so diverse. We have someone here that we know is like a head nerd of HL7 and is always talking. And you put him on the podium, and he turns out to be a stand-up comedian. So it's often these totally unexpected things that I really like finding an opera singer and all these talents around. So and that's also nice, for example, about the Nerd Awards, where people can finally confess about their most nerdy stuff that they do at home, and that can go so many ways. Like I remember someone building a garage door in the style of these Back to the Future style doors in cars, and it's just Dev Days is normally full of these things. So that's one of the things I remember. I think one of the things that I can just talk about is probably from one of the first Dev Days in Amsterdam, where we had maybe the bad idea of finding a social event right in the red light district of Amsterdam, and we just walked with everyone. I don't know what we were thinking, but we just walked with everyone, split up everyone in different groups, and then moved through this whole oldest part of Amsterdam. Somehow all of us knew how to arrive at a place that we called the Beer Factory, and actually every single table there had a tap built in. And so that became a long night. And I think some of the speakers that had to speak the next day even didn't show up. So that was like the spirit in the some of the first years of Dev
Yeah.
Days that I remember. Yeah.
Did somebody like by accident like walk into what is it, the red light? One of the red light
Yeah.
districts there.
Because someone by accident, someone probably did. Yeah, we might
But
have
they
lost a few people.
misread
Yeah.
fire to
Yeah.
mean right something else.
Right. Yeah.
Something
So
very passionate. Yeah.
yeah, and
No,
yeah.
yeah, we
So
try to get a lot of social stuff also into Dev Days, and of course the core part is a lot of really good Fire content. But we're strong believers that like for good interoperability, you need to build trust among people. It's not just about a standard. It's not
right.
just about the knowledge and a YouTube video. It's like being able to trust each other that you can work together. So we have a lot of networking and shared lunch and social events this year too, where we go out to a lovely museum this year. We have the Nerd Award again, where we indeed people can share their nerdy projects. Whether it's like I think Dan Freeman from HLSF shared this lovely project on automating his pet turtles and all their home automation and these kind of things. So we're bringing the student track also back this year to the US. So we have and our audience is always very excited to interact with them and help them and watch their presentations, because yeah, it's really the future, and we try to get a lot of people on board um, uh, while Ewout is being ushered
Yeah.
out of a room apparently. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Just to see what they come up with. And I think last year someone won with a project where they try to manage anxiety and depression with a nice app, um, and get all the data out of that from in a structured FHIR way to their FHIR server, and then there were meditations in the app and such. Yeah, really exciting to see. And actually, some of the first people that won the student track in one of the first years of Dev Days, they're now supervising other students that have also already won at the next edition of Dev Days, and one of their students is now helping us organize the student track every year. So that's yeah, really nice to see this community building over time.
Yeah, well, that's also because we have quite a bit of history now, right? We started 15 years ago, so you see a lot of the people that came in from the beginning. Let's see that are truly embedded in how healthcare interoperability can be done, how important the community is, and those people in the last 10 to 15 years have also grown into positions, sometimes in organizations, but also at national level, where they actually can make a difference. So I also think that you do see a little bit of a generational shift here, just already where you saw with doctors, where first was like, what's a mouse, and now like it's so embedded in their work. And we kind of start to see the same thing with thought leaders now who've been growing up with this problem and in this community. So that helps, of course. That helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so really looking forward to it. And, I feel like as we see the adoption of Fire grow, also there's more people coming, and I feel like there's a lot more like talks this year than like I've ever seen, a more diverse set of subjects too, right? So obviously we
Right.
have AI, we know about that, but like there's all these other kind of cool
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I've seen like Brandon Keeler's in there, which you wouldn't expect at Dev Days, right? But
Yeah, really
people
happy to
like
have him.
Josh Mandel and others from kind of academia and medical center.
Yeah.
There's other kind of like author of the book, if you want to talk about that word.
Sure. Yeah. So that's one of our keynotes. We have a lot of nice keynotes, but one of them is Vivian Lee, who is she used to be, I think, the head of healthcare at Verily. Now she's back at Harvard Business School, but she wrote a really nice book on the future of healthcare. And I think you'll see with the audience at Dev Days that they're generally very compassionate with the whole FHIR ecosystem, with patient data access, with keeping the healthcare system affordable over time. And she has some really nice overview from her time as a head of a healthcare system, as one of the leads at Verily, what this system needs over time, and especially in this US edition, the US healthcare system but this is a universal problem, of course, with an aging population. How do we keep the healthcare system affordable. So really looking forward to her. And you'll see that these are a lot of teams that will come back and are generally also supported by FHIR, like involving the patient in their own decisions and seeing what they actually care about, and not just continue to treat patients because the doctor has another idea of what could be done. Also shifting a lot to prevention rather than treating in hindsight. So seeing how the business models needs to be changed by that. And you'll see that a lot of that is also in the US supported by making the data flow better between the governments, between the payers, between the providers, to make sure that they can better care for a patient rather than just staying in their own little niche. And while the patient doesn't have great access to that. So yeah, that's one of the keynotes I'm very excited about. Also, you'll see that we have another Women for FHIR focused day basically on there with multiple sessions. But part of that is getting updates from our previous Women for FHIR sessions where we try to focus on women's health and see why that's still really hard to model, why there's still, even though this is like a half of the entire world population, still a lot of their primary concerns, like menstrual bleeding, for example, happens to a lot of women. Why is that still not something that many physicians will talk about, and that's something that you cannot structured relay within data? So we have a lot of focus on that. We have a nice keynote there from or a fireside chat basically with Chris Curry from URA, so the URA ring. And she's I think head of women's health there, and how they're storing menstrual health data, how they're also trying to work together with the healthcare system. So wearables is another focus that you'll see a lot, on trying to bring the patient and the doctor closer together, and not just when they're in the healthcare system, but also at home. They have a lot more time to look at their own data. They have a lot more time to monitor their own data. And if you are able to get a good conversation together between the patient and the doctor there, that's essential. I think that also bridges into the work that Imran Qureshi will present from Be Well. They worked closely with OpenAI, but now also I think with Google's Gemini and with Samsung Health to bring FHIR and AI together in chatbots, but also get wearable data in there in a useful way without flooding your entire context window with FHIR resources. Yeah, so these are a lot of the keynotes. The keynotes are generally more focused on inspiring you. Why are we actually doing this? And I think that really resonates with a lot of people who are at dev days, not just caring about like the JSON and the XML, but really about what do we do this for? How do we get the data to the patients? How do we make sure that we continue to have great healthcare?
And then you drink a coffee and then you dive into a presentation on efficient implementation of view definitions, right? Or the next implementation of FHIRPath in Kotlin. Yeah.
There's also a lot to nerd out to. Yeah,
there's a lot to nerd out. But this is where this is of course what many of us who started out with, and it's interesting that I share a history with our CEO, with Martine, on trying to get a healthcare app done for people doing like cytostatic medications for brain tumors, because your cognitive abilities don't really improve when you have a brain tumor. Yet you probably have one of the most complex medication schemas that
regimes,
you probably have, right? So we tried to write an app back then and get everyone interested. We actually built the app, with showing would remind patients on when to take the medications and all that stuff. And it was this was when I was just busy with FHIR, but it wasn't just everywhere. And then we just couldn't plug it because doctors had to like input data into their own, like I think it was an Epic system back then without FHIR support, or in our system. Like that just never worked out. And I think getting back to like also the problem for women's data here is that if the data you want to share is too much like not part of maybe either the big, like at this moment, like prior auth or a big financial flow, or if it's just not, it is really patient for a small patient group, then it's hard to get traction there. And so whether you're a woman or for example, a patient with a brain tumor, at this point, it's still, if you're not at the center of interest at this moment, it's really hard to get your data standardized and to make that data flow. And I think that's also what we're seeing at the Women for FHIR, where it's simply not yet at the center of attention. And so no one will actually take that first step of actually starting to standardize it, write an IG about it, right? Do those things, bring the people together to make all that stuff work. And that's what motivated us in the beginning. So I'm still hoping that the day comes where, I can put the dust off my little brain tumor app here and say, now we've got FHIR to a phase where I can try that again.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I would say like a couple of things just from my thoughts are in terms of companies out there, there's still quite a few that have never heard of FHIR or maybe have heard of FHIR and decided not to send people there. Even like one engineer that's been working on their data engineering side and they're working on the custom schemas, they're working in the custom databases, and
Right.
they're managing 100 million different CSV extracts that are going back and forth between as we famously discussed with Michael Westover of Providence, like that's still the dominant method of data exchange, at least between like providers and payers. So, and I know, having worked in all different areas of healthcare, including pharmacy, there's still a huge need to standardize that. So I feel like there's like a huge runaway to grow.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
we haven't even like reached I don't know, the 25% saturation point. So I think there's like a long runaway for FHIR to grow now going every year, little by little, we're like making slow progress, I feel like.
It is like this is not a business where if you're in healthcare IT, this is never going to go fast, right? But it is these little steps, and some of these little steps are big steps. Like we in the beginning already, we talked a little bit about EHDS, the European Health Data Space, and by the time in 2030 that comes into force, it simply means that every single bit of software in the EU that has patient information needs to implement the same interfaces. And I think that is going to be like, for me, that's world moving. This is not I'm so looking forward to that because it will give a lot of people that little push, or that maybe that single developer you talked about, that push to say, listen, manager, or listen, lead dev, even if you don't care about FHIR, this is going to be the standard. So if we have got to choose anything, let's choose what EHDS is already demanding from us. And so I think this will also, because it is maybe top down, but it will give a lot of bottom up power to people who want to do the right thing. So yeah, I'm still enthusiastic about this field as slowly as it moves, because I can still see these things. I see this room full of smart people from all over Europe, for example, debating what our European models are going to look like. And that makes me really hopeful.
Yeah, and hopefully once indeed that's the first implementation is there, you can build on that, and suddenly that's the easiest way to add a little bit of extra functionality. Like we've seen that in the US too. It starts with some companies just being forced by regulation to implement something, but then at Farley, we like to work with the companies that actually see this as an opportunity to leap forward and not just comply with the regulation, but take that as an opportunity to jump further and maybe give a lot of other access, work together with other companies. Yeah, you see this as a nice opportunity to jump into the future, standardize their data nicely, and use that for their own analytics, use that for their own patient access, all these additional features we can build on top of that.
Yeah. I feel like we need like a FHIR for business leaders guide for executives that are making a lot of these decisions, and why you should be on FHIR. And maybe, Ewout, it could be one of the use cases that you talked about with the
Yeah.
European leaders all in the room, and why that's better than kind of what's been done before, and how much money is just being spent on this stuff with just redesigning stuff over and over and having people map the data between all these different organizations and how much cost that adds to the system, because I don't think people understand that really.
No.
Yeah.
But of course, because we all know this in the short term. Most of the time, not being standardized is a win, right? You got your project budget, you got your project deadlines, and if you can go straight to the goal, and it's most of the time it's just easy, and you got like two parties to talk to, then most of the time it's easiest just to make up your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this is just human behavior,
Quick and dirty becomes like quick and expensive, right?
right?
Like
Quick and expensive.
so you think you're saving money in the short term, but in the long term, you're probably making the situation much worse. And I think I saw this firsthand, and I've been at provider organizations over the years, and large health insurance plan and large health system in the U.S., right? Like billion dollar, and all the different ways that data flows through Excel files and the CSV files and all the different areas of, issues that it feeds. And there's a lot of entrenched interests that don't want to get rid of. There's 150 people in the quality department that all they do is go into patient charts and chart chase that every year for HEDIS. So like that's part of like why CQA wants to move that to FHIR, is because once it's standardized, you could go and look at this data and you can have all the measures run at the point of care. But yeah,
While you're at that topic, Eugene, if you're a business leader listening to this and you think, I want to know more about FHIR, but I'm not a developer, the pre-conference Monday, we have these two pre-conference days. One of them is the Foundations Bootcamp. That's for everyone who wants to get quickly up to speed with FHIR. It's like a one-day course, and then you're completely up to speed, and you can easily like jump in through all the detailed sessions the rest of the day. But the other one is the strategy forum, where we really bring indeed exactly that audience that you just mentioned together in a room to discuss with each other. A lot of networking. We bring a lot of great people from ranging from U.S. government to Brandon Keeler that you mentioned before, and other experts really on where this FHIR is moving, and also what's the business case for implementing FHIR. How do you convince your boss that that FHIR is indeed the better and cheaper implementation in the long way? Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been really great. I think a lot of interesting stuff, and didn't know the whole bit about Diego and being comedian, but that makes sense now that I'm thinking about it, and a lot
He
of
still
the
is.
things that I know he's been doing with games and things like that. So that's great. And
He's actually organizing
yeah,
a game at FHIR
yeah.
Dev Days too. He has a really
Okay.
nice card game that you can play with him.
And Ewout, so you're a musician. So are we going to see you maybe perform on stage at Dev Days one of these days?
Like in the European version last year, we actually put together a band for the first time, I think, or maybe not even the first time, but we put together a band, and it's still on my list to do that for this year's edition as well. So yeah, we're definitely going to try to get see the surprising other side of people and make some music. So by the way, if you're seeing this and you think, hey, I like to make some music at Dev Days, contact me, because we can still use a few instruments or singers. So I know I can depend on Ward for the singing, but oh my goodness! But no, you're more than welcome. I think having a band is a nice idea to to bring together people, music as well. So I'm gonna try to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I may take you up on that. Although I did not qualify for Juilliard, Juilliard in New York City.
Yeah.
Yep.
I initially, when my family, immigrated from Russia when I was 12, I played the clarinet, and so they thought that I could audition for that, but no, did not pursue that. So not quite, but I do play.
You don't demand Juilliard level. Don't worry.
I do play the piano a little bit, as a hobby. So whatever. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen. This has been really awesome, and looking forward to seeing you all in person at Dev Days.
Yeah, looking forward to see you there, Eugene. If anyone wants to know more, go to devdays.com. Just to remember, June 15 to 18, Minneapolis. Looking forward to see you there.
That's right.
See you
Awesome.
there.
Thanks, Eugene.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
Good day.